Welcome to the Adapt Podcast, a podcast for executive leaders looking to be successful in the digital age. Get practical tips from successful leaders and listen as digital movers and shakers talk about how they transformed companies into the digital era. Here is your host, Luis Gonzalez.
Welcome to another episode of the Adapt Podcast. Today I have André Marquet. It's an honor to have André here. So I have been following his work for many, many years. I truly believe André is one of the big pillars of startups in Portugal. It's my personal opinion. I will explain why. But welcome, André. It's a pleasure to have you here. And please, feel free to share a bit about yourself, your journey, who are you, and how we are going to change Portugal and the world.
Okay, thanks, Luis. Great intro. Also, very fond of your work. So I'm a lecturer of products at the Lisbon Católica Business School and also now Técnico Mais. I'm running the Productize podcast. I also advise product leaders and founders, and I've been the co-founder of the Productize conference and also Beta E, a startup hub here in Lisbon. And I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So I had one crash, I had one exit, and now I lead the experimentation team at Coffee Dish in Lisbon.
So I've been following your work for so many years. It's very interesting what you have been doing. Your profile is much more, I believe, in building really great products with startups and digital companies. That's why I want to bring you to this podcast, because this podcast at this moment is a lot about digital transformation and so on, but it's very well connected. So that's why I wanna bring you here. So I want to start with a very basic question. Nowadays, as you know, everyone is talking about digital transformation. Everyone has a different concept. Everyone has a different definition. So I would love to know, what is the definition of digital transformation for you?
Yeah. Look, I think that in most companies, that's still an ongoing discussion. But the discussion that I've been seeing for the last 2 or 3 years, and of course, being part of Productize, I've been preaching that for much longer, is what we call product transformation, right? Product-led transformation or product transformation, which is, in my view, a little bit more than just digital transformation, because digital transformation, which implies that you are transforming something that was not digital, right, into something which is now more digitized or more digital or more digitally prone. Whereas product transformation is a little bit more than that. It's not just bringing digital tools to the company or digitizing process or making the company more digitally centric. It's making the company more product centric, and that is what I see as the biggest challenge right now, is making companies more product centric. And why do I say that? Well, because if you do digital transformation and you become more efficient, but it's not necessarily transformational per se. If you do product transformation, you are forced to become a product centric company. And if you do that successfully, that might actually have a 10x, 100x, or even a 1000x impact on your business. That is at least 10x transformational. And product is arguably much harder. So you can go through digital transformation without getting killed, but you might try to do product transformation and not be successful at all, because it's a super hard process. What you are doing is really transforming what were essentially service-driven culture or a solution-driven culture into product-driven culture. And most companies are definitely not ready to do that. They will suffer a lot in that product transformation process, and they really need to want to do it very much in order for that to be successful in a way. So that's just my quick take on this question.
You just touched my heart.
I did. All right.
It just touched my heart. Why? Because this is exactly what I've been talking for so long, right? So a lot of people thinking digital transformation, I always use the example when we went through COVID-19, right? All the C-suite came to the TV and say, "Oh, now we are very digital. Now we are working from home, and we prepare our companies for our employees to be able to work from home. So we are very digital." And I just wanted, oh my god, I want to kill myself.
Exactly.
So I truly believe on what you are saying, because for me, with the adapt the book methodology that I've been trying to work on, I really believe on that, and I truly believe that digitalization is much more than that. And I still believe that, for example, a very young startup that comes out to the market at this moment, they still don't even understand, most of them, the potential of the digital age and exactly what you were saying. So they can be digital, they work remotely, everyone's spread all over the world, but they apply the same old principles, the same old business models. I think it's a bit what you were saying. You talk about product, I talk about digital business models. I think we are very
Yeah,
aligned on
I
that.
think we're very much aligned on that.
Yeah, because I think you cannot really do a digital transformation without rethink the complete business model and your entire product and entire offering and your entire customer segmentation and customer base and so on. So you really touch on the heart. And just to finish as an example for our listeners, I usually like to give the example of the traditional media, right? So traditional media were distributing newspapers, live, physical, and now most of them, they are distributing the copies digitally, and they believe they went through a huge digital transformation, but in reality they didn't do anything. They just
Yeah,
changed the channel they use to sell the newspaper. But even if you think about it, the model is exactly the same. Is selling advertisement is exactly the same as it was 20 years ago.
yeah,
But now they are being eaten alive by Facebook and so on, because it's a huge platform of content creation that everyone can access for free,
yeah,
right? So you can digitalize all the tools, all the process, but if your business model, and as you say, if your product doesn't change, it's not really thought through, it will not really go anywhere.
yeah. Exactly.
Thank you so much. We I think we are, well, that was touching my heart. So
Okay.
you touched on something that you said that's very difficult. The product is much more harder, and the companies are not really, some of them, ready for it. So I want to pick up on that one and ask, what do you think from your point of view? What is the biggest barriers for digital transformation for traditional business?
Well, again, I'm going to give you the product transformation lenses, okay? Which, but I think we're basically talking about the same. I
Yes.
think the biggest barriers is, look, you have a business, right? If you want to do digital transformation, like the sweet digital transformation, that is not going to be high stakes. You're not going to fundamentally change the business model. The moment you are fundamentally changing the business model, you are doing things like this. Very simple example. Okay. Let's say you are a Portuguese company. Okay. And you are being a Portuguese company, you have your market here in Portugal and you are serving primarily Portuguese customers. And you are building a great product and you are able to do and serve those customers with a great product. But great product by definition is not something you can contain in a bottle and say, oh, this is just for Portuguese customers. That'll be stupid. Why is that? Well, because the moment you do a great product, right? Why should only Portuguese customers use it? If it's good, if you can in a way scale it to other customers, then it doesn't make any sense because then you have an agency issue, which is suddenly you have customers in Portugal using a great product, and you might have customers in France and in Spain using a not so great product, and from a technical standpoint, it doesn't make any sense because it can be the same product. So all these great product companies that we all talk about, they never said, oh, we are WhatsApp and we are serving Russian and Ukrainian immigrants in San Francisco that want to talk with their families. And that's it. No, they said, okay, we are WhatsApp. We have built this app And by the way, WhatsApp was built by this Ukrainian guy that wanted to talk back to Ukraine, I don't know, 15 years ago, with voice over IP and messaging. And people are using it. Okay, great. So should only Ukrainian people in San Francisco keep using this platform? Of course not. So let's expand this. And suddenly you have the, you know, 500 million people using WhatsApp, and now it's part of Facebook and yalla, yalla, yalla. And this is the mindset you have to have. So how many companies have this mindset that you know? Very, very few. Most companies like, no, we are mandated to work in this geographical territory, and this is what
The
we want to
rectangle.
do. The rectangle. Or not even the rectangle, even the subset of the rectangle. And why is that? Oh, because that's the way business has been done. Yes, but that's the way it was set up 30 or 40 or 50 years ago when it made sense to do that kind of stuff, right? It's not the way it's meant to be for the future because geography is mostly relevant for if you are serving customers wherever they are, provided you can deliver value to them. And you can extract value from them, right? From, Stripe or any means of payment out there. So I think that's such a powerfully ingrained wall in most managers that when you say, "Oh, open your eye, it's a big world out there," they are, because they have been doing this in this way for so many times. I think it's really hard for them to understand that business is fundamentally changing, that borders are irrelevant, that the fintech from Lithuania can screw you so hard that you're going to disappear in 2 or 3 years, and you won't even be remembered after 6 months, as even if you were the king of the hill for 25 years or 30 years. And yeah, like you said before we were starting the podcast, and I'm not going to reveal here anything. I'm just going to say that for older managers, or older in mind, not older chronologically speaking, it's really hard for them to understand this new landscape. It's not about digital. It's about the geopolitical transformation that digital uh, brought to our world.
I usually say people love globalization and they think, oh, we can send some stuff to China and we can have cheap labor there. But they forget that actually the guys in China, they can come in as well and they steal the
Exactly, and
cake.
the guys from India,
Is
that
it?
it's happening, right? And the guys from Pakistan and everywhere else. Like,
Exactly.
it's a two-way
So
street,
it's,
right?
yes, so they only see on one direction, but in reality, it's much critical. And you're touching a very interesting point because it's what I've been talking with people and say, I have this crazy dream to help Portugal to come back from the ashes like Phoenix, and I always say, guys, 500 years ago we were very small and we were out there and we conquered the world, and now it's easier than before,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
right now with the digital age, because people are always complaining, oh, Portugal is so small, or our country is so small, the market is so small, but there is no such thing that anymore, because with the digital age you can, exactly like you said, think about the world as your market. You're right. And if you take a look into my company, the blog, this podcast, the webinars, all done in English. I talk on the weekly basis with people all over the world, and I'm in Germany, Portugal, but that doesn't matter. The geography, it's our entire planet, and maybe soon with Elon Musk, we can even go to Mars, and we have some customers there.
Luis, totally right. But you think like that. Uh, but how many of your customers, how many of your clients think like that, right? You go to their meetings, the language is still Portuguese. You go to their boards, and they are still thinking about the Portuguese market. Uh,
But
so
it's not just Portugal. It's not just
or maybe somewhere
Portugal.
else, but of course,
If you think about,
Martin, I don't, I'm
for
not interested.
example, Germany, right? It's where I spend a lot of my time, where I'm based. They are the same in a different way because their market is huge. So they, most of the times, they don't need to think about a global world, because the German economy by itself, it's it's big enough. But it's the same. They still think a lot about the local market. A lot of the things are done in German. Now, new generation is changing completely the game, of course, but it's very local. I think it's really the mindset of humans. Unless you are very young, you travel a lot, and then you are an immigrant like I am. So when you try to do something, you try to do it for the entire world and use it. But I think it's a limitation from, like you said, I don't want to talk about age on the physical part of it, but age on the mindset. And I truly believe that has a lot to do with the education system as well, right? So the education system format us, and you are doing some really good stuff on your side. I'm trying to do my stuff as well with some universities, but I think that's a big secret. The university has huge responsibility to actually help us on this side.
Yeah, universities
So
for sure.
so we talked about the transform or the challenges, let's say, but and we started to talk a bit about the potential. But from your point of view, what are the big advantage that companies can think or can take advantage out of this digital age?
So I think the biggest, most obvious advantage is the fact that you can now uh, serve much more clients much faster and cheaper through digitized means, right? Um, the the second biggest advantage might relate to what we were just speaking about, which is suddenly if your product is good and if you engineer it and you design it in a way that they can actually scale, then you can scale it and you can scale to audiences and to customers that you were not foreseeing to get in the in the beginning. Um, and in many ways, that is the design of the internet, right? That is the way that it was meant to be when it was engineered in the first place, right? In the 40s or sorry, in fact, in the 60s or 70s, which is it doesn't really matter what you are. Um, so again, I think this advantage of leveraging geography is not being used by most companies where I've traditionally been working with. So because they are self-castrating their own reach, and that is really, really stupid in many ways. I understand that from a business mindset, but think about it. New fintechs, they do not operate like, oh, we are going to build, and I'm speaking about fintech, but of course, I could be speaking about um, anything else, right? But if you are building your headquarters in the UK, then you are serving European customers, and then of course in the UK they were unlucky because then there was the Brexit, they had to move elsewhere. But to the point, this is essentially the same, and you are serving customers at least in the most outreaching geographical mandate that you can, provided you build the necessary legal framework to serve those customers. But you're not opening, oh, let's say, oh, you guys are opening Portugal and you're opening Spain or you're opening whatever it is, and you're serving customers in those geographies. No, that's not the way that was designed, right? It was designed from the initial setting so that it could serve customers anywhere, at least in this wider reach geographical mandate in very highly regulated sectors. I'm not even talking about non-regulated sectors like or very poorly regulated sectors like social media or anything like that. That right where you are born in Uzbekistan and you can have users from all over the world. Doesn't really matter. So I think that's the geographical leverage is the one that I think it has the most impact, but is the one that I think most companies are leveraging the least, just because of this mindset view that they should be serving customers in X country or Y country instead of all over the place where they should be providing value.
Yes, I think the same. I have an interesting customer, or actually a country where I work, which is Saudi Arabia, and those
Mm-hmm.
guys are very different, um, because now they have the vision of the king and so on, the prince. But it's very interesting. You talk about their vision and they want to conquer the world. It's very, very interesting. So it's a different type of people, uh, very young,
They
guys,
want to conquer
30.
the world so much that they even made tactical truces with Israel, right? And now they have
Yeah,
a flight from Riyadh to Tel Aviv, which was something that, even two
it
years
was
ago or
impossible.
3 years ago would be totally impossible. People would call it crazy. That's how much you are willing to change when you do pieces, when you do truces and you do peace with your archie enemy in order to change the society that you are living in, right? That is something that should make us think a little bit, right?
It's true. It's true.
And of course,
And
another great example is Israel, right? And how they have this very bullish attitude towards making, the entire country is a digital transformed country. And in many ways, I think Israel is also a good example of a product transformation country, because in Israel, I usually give this example, which might be an exaggeration, but I don't think anyone in Israel is writing a line of code that has not been sold several times already before it has been written, if you know what I mean, Luis, right? So, uh, if you, most companies there are product driven companies. So you don't have service IT companies in Israel like you have uh, here in Portugal, arguably, because um, if you are hiring an engineer for a product driven company, you can pay him so much more. And if you are hiring an agency like engineer or developer for an agency kind of job, then if you're not charging agency rates, then it's going to be very hard to pay him competitively. So you have to ask for much more money, and yeah, and at least here in Portugal, I still want to see that.
it's already happening in Portugal, right?
It is.
So a lot of people is complaining. That's a very interesting topic what you raised, because I've been talking with a lot of people and a lot of my colleagues. They're saying, "Oh my God, it's almost impossible to keep talent. There is no talent anywhere." It's like,
Exactly.
no, there is a lot of talent. Or let's rephrase it. There is not a lot of talent, but there is quite good amount of talent in Portugal. The problem is people is complaining is because 90% of them, they are service organizations, service companies,
Yeah.
and they are
Exactly.
competing with a bunch of international startups that are coming here and picking up
They
the
are.
example of Israel, right?
Yeah.
I talked with an executive a couple of weeks ago where they say, well, in Israel, we pay 150K for a developer. We come to
Yeah.
Portugal and pay 80, 90K, which are a
But
lot of
less.
cash in Portugal,
Yeah.
much cheaper than in Israel.
Absolutely.
And Portuguese companies, 90% of them
Yeah. They
service
cannot.
companies,
They
they
cannot.
cannot compete.
They cannot compete.
Do you want a guide to ensure you will not become irrelevant in the digital era? Download the Amazon bestseller book, Adapt. AdaptMethodology.com/book.
They are outcompeted. And that is happening more and more. And I think that's the biggest challenge for our IT sector, traditional IT sector. I think they have been relying on rather cheap labor and rather low productivity in terms. And when people talk about productivity, I think that's a funny story. Let me just digress a little bit into productivity. So let's say you and me, we are selling exactly the same service, right? But you are selling 1 hour for 500 euro rate, and I'm selling my hour for 100 euro rate. Who's the most productive, right? You are the most productive because you are charging much more. And it doesn't
Yes.
matter if it doesn't matter if
And we do exactly the same
we
and
do
we
it
produce
exactly the
exactly
same,
the
right? We
same.
produce exactly the same. You do 1 hour consulting with me and you love it, and you do 1 hour consulting with you and people love it. It's still the same. But I charge 100 and you charge 500. And that is happening on a constant basis. So the biggest problem of the Portuguese economy, as you know, is low productivity, and lots of that low productivity relates to charging very little money for rather quite okay job. So we are charging under the charging price. So we are competitive, but we are not productive, which is rather a strange story, but that's just the way I see it in the IT space. And I see that that is going to happen more and more for these IT service companies. They are not charging high enough. It's mostly because they are also working with Portuguese customers, which are not willing to pay that much neither. So they will have lots of their talent going to this product or VC-backed companies willing to pay much more. And
And
yeah, and I
because
think the landscape will change a lot in the next 2 or 3 years for IT talent here in Portugal.
now going back to what we were discussing, and most of the Portuguese companies never thought in going international. They always thought in staying here in this small rectangle, right? So the prices of the competition was based on the prices. So they never develop proper business models to go abroad. They never develop a network of customers abroad. And now they are screwed because basically
No,
they cannot compete.
yeah, I think you're never screwed if you're willing to change. And I think
I
as
agree.
a consultant, you are always selling that vision, right? Which is you're never screwed if you are willing to change. We were talking about that before the podcast, willingness to change. And you were telling me that in some companies, the problem is you have a generation of people willing to change, and then you have a generation of manager that is not willing to change for different reasons. So if you are willing to change, there is always hope, right?
Yes. Yes. But do you believe there is hope? I believe. I believe.
Yeah, I think so. I think what you have seen in the last so in the tech sector here, I think you have seen that, right, Bush? And you have seen the growth of the startup community, which maybe when you left Portugal was non-existent, and now
It was
you do
non-existent.
you
Zero.
do have
Zero.
a startup community, and it's still growing, and it's still ever and ever more respected outside
And we are
Portugal.
appearing in many, many, many newspapers and magazines. We are appearing more and more on top
Yeah,
of the not of the world, but in Europe and so on. So
I
we are
think
really growing.
the biggest challenge, or the biggest question to me at least, is where where is the incumbent uh, companies are going to be able to productize themselves, and to a larger degree, uh, I don't know. Um, and, and 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 look, economy is not just startups, right? But I'm a very fundamentally, I believe in creative destruction, right? I believe that new companies will come in to substitute the old ones, and that's fundamentally a good thing, provided that it's actually happening. Provided
Darwin law.
you do have some Darwin movement going on. Uh, I'm just not so sure whether the Portuguese economy is Darwinistic enough for that to happen, because you do have lots of government intervention towards saving companies that are essentially not working anymore. So I don't know. I really hope that this Darwinistic movement will keep going, and will help
I,
transition our
I believe
economy towards more.
I wrote an article a couple of months ago, very
Yeah,
polemic one, of course, that for them imagine the money that the government injected in banks and TAP and so on, if that amount of money would be injected in creating new startups, I'm pretty sure that we would become a much more robust and strong country than just injecting. Because the problem, I don't have problems in
how,
helping companies.
I think I followed that article of yours, but were you defending that the money should be like going into a VC fund? What was exactly the line of thought there?
Oh, my line of thought, it would be, for example, there is the PRR now for using the money from EU, but for me, I would be injecting that money directly on startups, where startups could apply directly to funds financing. So it's a VC, but maybe a public one, where the money would be used to apply in startups that wanted to start new business.
Like Portugal Ventures,
Yeah, for example.
but with more money, with 10x more money.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally. I'm in line with you. It's like, why should we keep investing in an old, failed, 75-year-old company that has proven not to be successful financially if we could try to build the next air, the next Ryanair or the next, I don't know, Virgin Galactic or the next SpaceX or whatever it was, right? And I,
Because don't take me
yeah,
wrong, I believe that we can help some companies and crises like COVID appear and so on, and sometimes companies are not prepared, and that are exceptions. So I don't mind to help companies in some way, but helping companies that everyone knows they are broken and injecting money there is like a black hole because nothing will happen. It's just completely outdated, badly
totally,
managed.
totally,
The system is
totally,
completely corrupted, broken. So why put the money there, right? So
totally,
it's a little
totally,
bit in the bigger scale. In the bigger scale is FMI comes and injects money in the country. Well, I don't believe it will cause a big result because the way how the country is managed would need to drastically change, and that will not happen, right? So the system is set up
totally.
and the money will just disappear like always disappeared.
Yeah, and when that money disappears, more money will come because there's always more money to that is coming in to cover for money that has disappeared. Uh, but but yeah, I think you're touching a very relevant point, and you know, again to my point, the Darwinistic value that we could have by let's imagine this alternative scenario where top was bankrupt and was not salvaged, and suddenly the government saying, okay, we're going to create this 1,000 million euro fund for new ventures. How many companies could you create with 1 billion euros in Portugal? A lot, like hundreds of companies, right? Or at least hundreds of companies. I think that's for sure, or thousands maybe. So yeah, and the chances that at least a couple of those 1,000 companies could become, scale ups would be very, very high. It's even considering historical figures from the track record, even from Portugal Ventures. So we just had a good example this week. I think today or yesterday, Vanium from Porto announced that they had sold themselves to an Israeli startup. Um, they are a technological intelligent networking platform for the Internet of Multi-Things, and now they are part of Nexar. Nexar is Israeli startup that is very strong in the mobility applications field. This is a great example of a company that I don't know, it's maybe 10 years old, um, was able to create advanced mesh technologies, and now they sold themselves to an Israeli company. I think the next step is, when are we going to able to do the opposite, which is when are we going to see an Israeli company or a startup being bought, or scale up being bought by a Portuguese scale up or a unicorn, and maybe the next step is the $1 billion exit, because in this case, I think this was maybe a 60 or 80 million deal. Uh, I'm not sure they have disclosed the exact amount, but it
Yeah,
was,
but think about
not a unicorn
80,
deal.
80 million, what, 20%, 30% corporate tax that these guys need to pay to the government. I don't know. So
I
20 million.
Yeah, I don't know about the specifics of the tax issues, but I'm
But
pretty sure that the
let's
founder
fantasize here.
is is
But let's
is
fantasize
wealthy
here.
enough now to buy his new boat.
So let's fantasize here a bit here. So if you think about exactly the example that you were saying, right? So even if the companies don't completely do the exit, right? If a bunch of them get sold, right? Imagine this 1 billion. If you start hundreds of companies with that 1 billion. It's not that hard actually to get that money back in taxes after a few years.
Yeah, exactly. And it's much better than losing all that money to, which is
To not
actually
even
what
talk
is
about
going
the social
to happen
security
with
and the
stuff,
corporate
right?
tax that they
Basically.
generate year by year. Right.
Yeah, totally. Another, sometimes another counter narrative I have is I wake up and I think, okay, and this is actually much harder to imagine than I thought in the beginning, which is, okay, Portugal is now in the 25,000 USD GDP per capita. I think uh, the GDP per capita of Portugal in it's. I'm just going to check it out. I don't want to do a wrong number. Yeah, it's exactly 23,000 USD. The GDP per capita of Switzerland is 86,000, and the GDP per capita of Israel, yeah, it's 43,000. So it's roughly almost a double, and the GDP per capita of Switzerland is 4 times as big. And I wake up and I start, okay, and I think, how would my life and your life be different if suddenly I wake up in a country with twice the GDP like Israel or 4 times the GDP like Switzerland? It's a very simple question. So how would my life be different? What kind of car would I have? What kind of house would I be living? Or how would this neighborhood look like? Um, and you know what? It's really hard to imagine. It's really hard to imagine because I think you think, oh, maybe I could have a better car, or maybe I could have a better life, or maybe my kids could be in a better school. But yeah, maybe I don't know. Um, it's really hard to imagine. So, but I think a lot about that. I think it's maybe people think, oh, that's a stupid question. It's like, if you want to know what it feels like, you just go to Switzerland and you go to Israel. And I've been there many times. But my question is not how is Switzerland, how is Israel, or how is Germany, or whatever. My question is, how would my life and how life in
Yes.
Portugal be different if our GDP per capita, our gross domestic product, our wealth would be twice or 4 times as big on average, right? It's not just me, it's everyone else in my neighborhood, in my city would be twice as rich or 4 times as rich or whatever it was. Um, and I cannot even think about it. Right? And I think it will be a much better setting. And I think the question is that, Wish, is what kind of vision we want to have for our future. And sometimes I had this discussion with friends, is like, Portuguese people, they are just totally happy being fairly poor. Just, I have my life. I have on average, right? I'm not saying you or me or X or Z, or I'm saying the average Portuguese person. Just, they don't know better, or they just happily where they are, provided I have my bacalhau and I have my vinho branco and I have the sun and, why should I have more? Why do I want
like,
more?
like
No,
like
not
they would
really. It's
say,
like
Amalia,
perfectly fine about this.
fado e football.
Exactly. So that's a tragic destiny, which I'm not sure that we as a country we want to change. And I know this is a digital podcast, but you know, people that go into digital or they go into tech, after a while they know it's not about tech, they know it's about not about digital. It's always about culture. It's always about leadership. It's always about policy. It's always about the generic macroeconomic framework, and technology is always an enabler. It's always a means towards an end, but at at the end it's always about the culture inside the company, and inside the country is the same. It's whether we have the necessary culture to change, and I'm not so sure about that, to be honest.
I want to pick up on that. So I want to pick up on the leadership, culture, etc., policy. So this is a podcast for leaders to help them to build fantastic companies and utilizing our digital age. So I would like to get 5 minutes so that we can start closing the podcast, but 5 minutes from you where you could give some advices. So if the guys are in the big trouble, you, Andre, can come and help them, what are the advices that you are having for them that they should start doing in order to really have a company that would be adapted to the digital era, where it could take the benefit of using this globalization and yeah, and go worldwide
So lots
and
of
become
different
a
companies.
powerful company.
It's a very loaded question, right? So it depends on the company, depends on the industry, depends on the size, the maturity of the project, etc. So I've been talking a lot with startups, as you know, and I give my best advice to them, and for startups they might have lots of challenges, but so the first thing is, whether it's for startups or big companies, is, are you building the right thing, right? Which is not, it's not doing the product right. It's, are you doing it? Are you doing the right bit for the customers? And is there a market for that? So I try to spend a lot of time with people, understanding if they are actually going towards product market fit. Okay. Because I think that's really the biggest challenge every company has. And for corporates, it's the same, because corporates are developing new ventures or developing new products or services. They always have, they also have to go to product market fit. So it's the same challenge. And my biggest recommendation is really to spend has most times thinking about the problem and trying to craft solutions that make sense. And the second might be to have this, not be, artificially bounded by anything that is preventing you from being the most ambitious that you can be. We have to think like an Israeli. The other day, I was at Talk Desk, Portuguese unicorn, and I was talking with their COO that used to be an Israeli guy, and he told me, André, when I met Tiago is the founder
The founder.
of Talk Desk, one of the founders along with Christina Fonseca. And he told me, when I met Tiago was pitching me the company, and then I started working with Tiago. And I told Tiago, you are more Israeli than I am, because you are so ambitious, because you always want more, because you always want to grow bigger, more growth, more markets, better products, more advanced stuff. And you have to have that mindset. Uh, Most companies that I've been working with, if they are artificially bounded to a smaller ambition space, they're not going to think big enough. So you have to think big enough to have to want more, and to be uh, and to have the most impact that you can possibly have.
Wow, that was powerful. I loved it. Thank you so much. To close this podcast, I would like to, and this one actually was almost the advice. You almost closed with the advice, but I want to ask you another one. I want to close the podcast with an advice from you to the leaders that are listening to us. So, what is the advice that you have for them to really succeed in their jobs, creating great companies that will be known worldwide?
Look, I struggle a little bit with giving advice to young leaders. I think every leader, of course, has to find its own paths or its own paths. And I would just say that thinking a little bit more like Tiago, or like Christina, right? Having this boundless ambition. That's actually a good title for maybe one of your next books. Boundless, not be bounded by constraints that are not really there. That's the funny thing. People think, oh, there is this constraint. No, 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 no. If the constraint is there and you cannot solve it, screw it. Go to another company. Do your own startup. Do your own thing. If the board is saying, oh, you have to think small, you have to stick to this, you have to, be small because we have a small mindset, then go to where you have a much greener grass, where you can grow bigger, where you can think bigger, because other people's limitations will limit you. So if you are a young leader, you are ambitious, you want to think big, go where you can think big, and stay there and try to prove yourself there. Because being boundless is so much more powerful than being bounded by artificial constraints that have no reason to be there at all.
Wow, that was fantastic. I even lost my words, but because I was already thinking something that I really believe we put boundaries exactly like you said where they aren't, and I think we sometimes are not enough. We are not dreaming enough, right? There was one mentor once told me in a bit different topic that he told me, if you have one idea, never worry about the money. That's one of the boundaries, right? So that we always think, oh, I cannot do it because I don't have the money. I don't have the money. There was one mentor that told me, never think the money is the problem. There is huge money out there. If you have a good idea, just go and the money will come. You just need to pitch, you need to chase people, but you will get it. And it's just a small example of what you were saying. Sometimes we have these boundaries, imaginary boundaries in our heads that we don't want to pursue our dreams because we start to complain and we start to look problems where it don't exist, right? So yeah, that was a great way to finish this podcast. Thank you so much. André,
Totally.
it was a pleasure. It was really nice to have you here. Always good to chat with you now in a more formal format in our podcast, but it was very, very cool.
And not so
Thank
formal
you so
to
much.
me. I tried to put a shirt on, but sorry for the not so
No.
professional setting.
When I say formal, it's not so informal as our beers, so it's a bit more formal than that.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, André. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure.
And yeah, we'll leave all the information on the notes about your contacts and how people can reach you.
Great. Have a great day.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Adapt podcast. Head on over to www.adaptmethodology.com/scorecard to benchmark your ability as a leader to adapt your entire organization to the digital era. You will be able to identify plenty of opportunities for leveraged growth.